Time is the one thing we assume is natural. We wake up when the sun rises, we sleep when it sets. For thousands of years, humanity lived by this rhythm. Noon was simply the moment the sun was highest in the sky. It was local, it was organic, it was real. But then, on a single day, that reality was stolen. On November 18, 1883, the clocks in America didn't just change, they were hacked. On that day at exactly noon, the sun was fired from its job as the timekeeper of the human race. We are told this was done for convenience. We are told that the railroad companies needed standardized schedules to prevent crashes and confusion. It's a boring, practical explanation. It's the kind of explanation you give to a child so they stop asking questions. But what if convenience was just the cover story? What if the standardization of time wasn't about catching a train? What if it was about synchronizing a machine? Today, we are going to investigate the possibility that the global railroad network wasn't built for transportation at all. We're going to look at the massive cathedrals we call train stations, buildings made of white marble that should have been black with soot. We're going to look at the electrical conduits built into their foundations decades before the power grid existed. And we're going to ask the question that history refuses to answer. Why did a group of competing corporations force the entire world to beat to the same artificial rhythm? Did they hack time to make the trains run on schedule? Or did they hack time because the grid they were operating required the entire planet to resonate at the exact same frequency? If you want to understand the heist, you have to look at the scene of the crime. And the crime scenes are hiding in plain sight. They are the buildings we rush through every morning on our way to work. Take Grand Central Terminal in New York. Completed in 1913, just look at the ceiling. It is a celestial mural spanning 12,000 square feet. It depicts the Mediterranean sky with 2,500 stars rendered in gold leaf against a teal green firmament. The main concourse is 275 feet long, 125 feet high. It is finished in Tennessee marble and adorned with statuary that wouldn't look out of place in the Vatican. Now, pause for a second. We are told this building was constructed to house steam locomotives, big, dirty, coal-burning iron horses. If you have ever stood near a coal fire, you know what happens. The soot is oily, it is sticky, it coats everything in a layer of black grime. So why would you build a pristine white marble palace with a gold leaf ceiling to house a coal factory? The heating systems in these buildings alone should have turned them black in a year. To heat a space of hundreds of thousands of cubic feet, like the waiting hall of Leipzig Hauptbahnhof in Germany or Penn Station in New York, you would need massive coal boilers running 24 hours a day. Where are the smokestacks? Where are the mountains of ash? Photographs from the 1890s and 1900s show these station interiors as pristine. The glass roofs are clean, the marble is white. They look barely used. It defies the physics of the industrial age, unless they weren't running on coal. Look at Victoria Terminus in Mumbai, completed in 1887. They call it a cathedral to steam. It has a central dome rising 225 feet. It has gargoyles, flying buttresses, stained glass. Why? Why do you need a cathedral to move commuters? The official story is civic pride. They say the robber barons wanted to show off. But that explanation requires us to believe that practical, ruthless businessmen wasted millions of dollars on unnecessary ornamentation that served no functional purpose. Or did it? What if the dome isn't for decoration? What if the tower isn't for a clock? What if the design of a cathedral and the design of a power plant are actually the same thing and we just forgot how to read the blueprints? Here is where the coincidence becomes a mathematical impossibility. This didn't just happen in New York, it happened everywhere, all at once. Between 1850 and 1920, over 1,000 substantial train stations were constructed in the United States alone. And globally, cities across 6 continents representing vastly different cultures, economies and governments all decided to build the exact same thing at the exact same time. Paris, Milan, Antwerp, Madrid, Sao Paulo, Melbourne, Tokyo, Cape Town. Remember, there was no internet, there were no telephones for most of this period. International travel took weeks or months. Yet architects in India and architects in Pennsylvania were building structures with identical proportions, identical technological features and identical aesthetic styles. They all feature the same massive clock towers, the same copper roofing, the same vaulted waiting rooms that dwarf the human beings inside them. The official story says this is convergent evolution. Everyone just happened to have the same good idea. But look at the logistics. To build these structures today with modern computers and cranes would take decades. Yet we are told that in the horse and buggy era with manual labour they built these massive stone complexes in 2 or 3 years. And there is another detail the history books ignore. Many of these stations show the same anomalies we've seen in the mudflood investigation. Ground floors that are buried, entrances that require walking down to get to the trains. It raises a disturbing possibility. Were these stations actually built in the 1800s? Or were they dug out? Were they renovated? Was the construction actually a restoration of a system that was already there? If you inherit a supercomputer but you only know how to use it as a heater, you might pile coal next to it and burn it. That's what the steam age looks like. We took these massive, resonant, crystalline machines, and we shoved dirty coal engines inside them and called it progress. But the smoking gun isn't the stone, it's the wires. Let's talk about electricity. We are taught that the electrical grid was developed slowly. Edison, Tesla, the 1920s, the 1930s. Most American homes didn't have reliable electricity until well into the 20th century. But look at the train stations. Union Station in Los Angeles, Grand Central in New York. When you look at the original architectural drawings, the ones that survived, you see something that shouldn't be there. You see electrical conduits built into the masonry foundations. Not retrofitted, not drilled in later, built in. Grand Central supposedly operated on gas lighting until 1913, yet the infrastructure for massive electrical distribution was present in the bones of the building. In many small towns across America, the train station was electrified decades before the town itself. How? Where was the power coming from? The records mention private generation or municipal supply, but the power plants simply aren't on the maps. We see stations consuming megawatts of power, enough to light a city with no visible source, unless the station was the source. Think about the rail network. What is a railroad track? It is two parallel metal conductors separated by wooden insulators, the ties, stretching for thousands of miles. It connects every major population centre. It is a circuit board, a continental scale circuit board. By 1890, this grid was complete. It connected everything, and sitting at the nodes of this grid were the stations, cathedrals built of conductive stone topped with copper domes spiked with metal towers. They weren't just waiting rooms, they were capacitors, they were receivers. They were the interface between the atmospheric energy above and the conductive grid below. But a grid like that has a requirement that the messy organic world of 1883 couldn't meet. It needs synchronization. If you are running a frequency-based power system, everything has to pulse at the exact same moment. If you are out of phase, the system crashes. Before 1883, time was local, it was solar. When the sun was overhead in Chicago, it was noon. In Cleveland, it might be 12:10. In St. Louis, 11:50. There were thousands of times across America. That works for people, it works for farmers, but it does not work for a frequency-based machine. So the corporations took over. On November 18, 1883, the railroad companies, private businesses mind you, declared that solar time was dead. They sliced the continent into 4 artificial time zones. They did this without a vote. They did this without a government mandate. Congress didn't officially adopt standard time until 1918, 35 years later. For 35 years, the entire population of North America lived on railroad time. We altered our sleep, our meals, our businesses to align with the needs of the machine. Why? The history books say to prevent train collisions, but you don't need to change the clocks in a farmhouse in Nebraska to prevent a train crash in Ohio. You just need a schedule. No, you force a population to synchronize when you are trying to entrain them. When you need the entire grid, the rails, the stations, the people, to operate on a single unified frequency. The time heist of 1883 was the moment we switched from being biological entities living in a solar world to being components in a machine living in a digital linear grid. The railroads didn't just conquer space, they conquered time. And then, once the heist was complete, once the grid was established, they destroyed the evidence. Starting in the 1950s and 60s, a wave of destruction swept through the railway world. The grandest, most technologically sophisticated stations were targeted for demolition. Pennsylvania Station in New York, a masterpiece of engineering built to last 1,000 years, demolished in 1963. Why? They said it was obsolete. Think about that word, obsolete. How is a granite building obsolete? It doesn't rust, it doesn't rot, it was structurally perfect. They didn't tear it down because it was broken, they tore it down because it was a witness. The stations that replaced them were boxes, concrete, steel, utilitarian. No resonance, no copper domes, no cathedral acoustics. By 1920, the era of building these grand temples stopped abruptly. We went from building palaces to building sheds. The knowledge was lost, or rather, the knowledge was hidden. The stations that survived were gutted. They call it renovation. They stripped out the original mechanical guts, they covered the conduit lines, they removed the antennae from the roofs. They turned the power plants into shopping malls. We still live on railroad time. We still check our watches, terrified of being a minute late, unaware that the system we serve was invented by a corporate cartel in 1883. The rails are still there. The surviving stations still stand. Silent giants from a forgotten age. We walk through them admiring their beauty, never realizing that we are walking through the cooling core of a planetary energy grid. They hacked reality. They synchronized the world. And then they broke the machine so we would never figure out how to turn it back on. But the tracks remain. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the hum. Thanks for watching. If you want to know about the Guardians, the giants who might have operated these massive stations, click the video on your screen now.